She always felt like she was invisible in the classroom. Every morning, she walked through the school gates carrying her bag that felt heavier than it should. Not because of books, but because of the weight of being underestimated. Teachers would call on other students first, assuming she did not know the answers. When she raised her hand, they sometimes ignored her or glanced at her with mild impatience, as if asking her to wait until they had more important things to do. She tried to tell herself it did not matter, that learning was her own journey, but inside, the frustration built quietly. At home, things were different. Her parents encouraged her every day, reminding her that everyone learns at their own pace. They saw her curiosity and the way her eyes lit up when she asked questions about things beyond the textbooks. They noticed how she would spend hours drawing, singing along with songs, or writing little stories in her notebook. But school was different. There, it felt like she was trapped under a glass ceiling no one would lift. The other students did not make it easy either. Some were kind and would whisper encouragement when teachers were not looking. But there were others who laughed when she stumbled over a word or got confused during lessons. They did not understand how much effort it took for her just to keep up. Every mistake felt magnified, every small success unnoticed. She often sat at her desk, pretending to copy notes while her mind wandered to other things, to places where she felt she belonged, places where she could be good at something. Math was especially hard. Numbers seemed to dance on the page, and formulas were like secret codes she could never quite crack. Her teachers often assumed she was careless or lazy. "Try harder," they would say, not realizing she was already giving her all. She tried every strategy she could think of. She copied examples from the board, read the chapters over and over, asked for help quietly during lunch breaks, but still the results did not come easily. Her grades reflected the struggle, not the effort. Reading and writing were a little easier, but even there, she felt overlooked. When she shared her ideas in class discussions, teachers would sometimes nod politely but quickly move on. "Interesting," they would say without really listening. Sometimes, she caught glimpses of her classmates' reactions. Rolling eyes, whispers, or shrugging shoulders. It hurt more than she wanted to admit, but she learned to smile anyway, to keep her voice small so it would not draw attention. Despite all of this, there were moments of light. She had a notebook she carried everywhere, filled with sketches, doodles, little poems, and song lyrics she wrote for herself. In those pages, she was confident, creative, and free. No one could misjudge her there. No one could tell her she was not enough because there, she was exactly who she wanted to be. These secret creations were her refuge, her safe place, and sometimes, late at night, she would read them under the blanket with a flashlight, imagining a world where people noticed her differently. Her family noticed her hidden talents. Her mother would watch her hum melodies while doing chores. Her father would peek at the sketches on her desk and smile at the details she captured. They celebrated these small victories at home because they knew that outside, the world was not ready to see her yet. They reminded her constantly that intelligence was not measured by grades alone, and that persistence mattered more than praise from others. They told her that sometimes, people misjudge those who are quiet, those who take longer to show their strength, and that her moment would come when everyone realized how wrong they had been. In class, things did not get easier. Teachers had a fixed idea of who she was. They assumed she would always struggle, so they gave her less attention, expecting less from her. She sometimes tried to prove them wrong, raising her hand confidently, solving problems on the board, hoping for a sign of approval. But often, they brushed it aside, as if her success was surprising and therefore not worth expecting. She began to feel that maybe they were right, that she was too slow, too quiet, too different. That thought scared her. At recess, she often wandered alone, drawing in the dirt with sticks or humming tunes she made up. Sometimes, a small group of kids would invite her to play, and she would join briefly, but mostly she preferred solitude. It was easier to be alone than to face the judgment of others. Still, even in these moments, she was learning and observing. She noticed how people moved, how they spoke, the way they reacted to each other. She noticed small details that others missed, the expressions, the pauses, the way a word could hurt or lift someone's spirit. These observations, she thought, were pieces of a puzzle she did not yet understand. But one day they might matter. There were days when she cried quietly in the bathroom, wishing someone would see her for who she really was. She wished a teacher would notice the effort she put in, the little sparks of talent she hid in her notebooks, the careful way she tried to improve every day. But then she would take a deep breath, smooth her hair, and walk back to class. She refused to let the discouragement break her completely. She told herself that she would find a way to shine, even if no one believed she could. Her love for music started as a whisper, something she did when no one was watching. She would tap rhythms on her desk, hum melodies under her breath, or sing quietly while walking home. The notes were not perfect, but they were hers, and they made her feel alive. Occasionally, her parents would hear her and encourage her, suggesting she join the school choir or take music lessons. She hesitated at first, unsure if she could handle more scrutiny, but deep down, she felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could show the world something beautiful. Art became another escape. She would sketch the world as she saw it, capturing tiny details, like the curve of a leaf, the smile of a classmate, the way sunlight fell across the playground. No one else seemed to notice these details, and maybe that was why she loved them. Art allowed her to express herself in ways words often failed her. She sometimes imagined her drawings coming to life, moving beyond the page, and everyone finally recognizing her for her talent. Even with her secret passions, the day-to-day life of being misunderstood wore on her. Classrooms felt heavy, filled with the low hum of expectation she could not meet. Tests and homework were constant reminders that her teachers had already decided who she was. But every evening, when she returned home, she could breathe again. She could play, create, and dream without limits. She began to understand that her value did not come from the approval of those who misjudged her. It came from her own persistence, her own courage to keep trying despite the doubts surrounding her. One afternoon, a substitute teacher entered the room and noticed her doodles in the margins of her notebook. Instead of a disapproving glance, she looked closely and asked questions about the drawings. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. The teacher praised her attention to detail and encouraged her to explore her art more seriously. That small acknowledgement lit a spark inside her. She realized that perhaps there were people who would notice, if only she kept going and stayed true to herself. The realization was small but powerful. She understood that the world would not always notice her immediately, that some teachers and classmates might always misjudge her, but that did not mean her talents were not real. Her strength lay in her persistence, her quiet determination to grow, and her willingness to explore the things she loved, even when others ignored them. That small insight gave her a sense of purpose. She decided to invest more time in her music, her art, and the little things that made her unique. She started to set small goals for herself. She would practice a song every day, sketch something new each afternoon, or write a short story every weekend. These goals were not about proving anyone wrong, but about proving to herself that she could achieve something meaningful. Slowly, the tiny victories began to change her confidence. She still felt nervous in class, still felt the sting of being underestimated, but the fear was no longer overwhelming. It became fuel, pushing her to work quietly, to prepare, to grow. Even at the lowest moments, she never lost hope completely. She clung to the thought that one day, she would have a chance to show the world her abilities in a way that could not be ignored. That day seemed far away, but the idea kept her going. Every sketch, every note, every small act of persistence was a brick in the foundation of her future. She might be misunderstood now, but she believed in herself. That belief was stronger than any judgment, stronger than any whisper of doubt. In those early years, the girl learned lessons that would shape the rest of her life. She learned patience, the value of persistence, and the power of believing in herself even when no one else did. She learned that failure was not final, that criticism could be used as motivation, and that small moments of joy mattered just as much as any recognition from others. She carried these lessons silently, preparing for the moment when the world would finally see what she had always known, that she was capable, talented, and worthy of attention. She walked through each day with quiet determination, sometimes overlooked, often underestimated, but always moving forward. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, her hands created wonders no one noticed, and her heart held dreams that could not be measured by grades or classroom approval. Though her teachers misjudged her, she began to understand that her moment was coming. And when it arrived, she would be ready. She had always known there was something inside her that the world did not see. A quiet strength, a spark, a little voice that whispered she could do more, even when others doubted her. It started as a small curiosity, almost accidental. One afternoon, during a free period at school, she wandered into the music room. She had never paid much attention to it before. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and old books, and the instruments lined up in the corner looked like they were waiting for someone to give them life. She approached the piano quietly, her fingers hovering above the keys. First, she was timid. She had never learned properly, never had a teacher, never been told she could play. But when she pressed a key, the note rang out, clear and bright. She smiled, a little surprised. It was as if the sound had been waiting for her all along. She pressed a few more keys, experimenting, moving her fingers without thinking too much. Each note seemed to tell a story, and she felt a thrill she had never felt in a classroom before. After that day, she began visiting the music room whenever she could. Sometimes during lunch, sometimes after school, she would sit at the piano and play. She learned simple songs at first, matching the keys to the sounds in her head. She made mistakes, often hitting wrong notes, but she did not mind. Each mistake was a lesson, and each small success was a victory. Slowly, the music started to flow more naturally. She began to recognize patterns, rhythms, and melodies. Music became her language, a way to express emotions that words could not capture. Her secret practice did not go entirely unnoticed. One day, a music teacher, noticing her curiosity, approached her gently. "I see you like playing," the teacher said, smiling. For a moment, she froze, unsure if she should respond. She had expected judgment or dismissal, but instead, she received encouragement. The teacher offered to show her a few techniques and gave her small tips that made her feel more confident. That encouragement, small as it was, ignited something deep inside her. She realized that she could grow, that she could improve, and that her efforts could be recognized if she tried. The music became more than just notes on a page. It became a companion. When she felt anxious or lonely, she would play. When the criticism from school felt heavy, she would play. When she was happy, she would play. The piano became a mirror of her feelings, and through it, she began to understand herself better. Each day she spent practicing, she discovered a little more about her abilities, her patience, and her determination. It was not just music that captured her attention. Art remained her secret haven. She would sit in the corners of the playground or the quiet spots of her home, sketching everything she saw. She noticed the way sunlight fell through the leaves, how shadows moved across the walls, the expressions on people's faces as they walked by. Her drawings were not just pictures, they were stories. Each sketch captured a moment in time, a feeling, a memory. The combination of music and art gave her a sense of identity she had not felt in classrooms filled with judgment and doubt. One day, the school announced an upcoming talent show. Posters went up around the hallways, and students buzzed with excitement. Some were confident, some nervous, but all were preparing to show their skills. When she read the announcement, a wave of both fear and excitement washed over her. Could she participate? Could she perform in front of people who had always underestimated her? The thought made her stomach twist, but at the same time, it lit a spark of possibility she had never felt before. She debated for days. The fear of embarrassment was strong, but stronger still was the desire to show what she could do. She decided to take a chance. Quietly, she told her parents about her idea. They smiled, their faces lighting up with encouragement. "This is your moment," they said. "No matter what happens, what matters is that you try. Show them what you can do." Their words stayed with her, echoing in her mind as she began to prepare for the performance. Preparation became a new focus in her life. She practiced the same piece on the piano repeatedly, learning to control her hands, her timing, and the emotions behind each note. She sketched out ideas for how she would present herself on stage, thinking about the small details, the way she would stand, the expressions she would show, the pauses she would take. Every day, she grew a little stronger, a little more confident. For the first time, she felt the thrill of anticipation not as fear, but as excitement. Her classmates began to notice the changes in her. She walked taller, smiled more often, and carried herself with a quiet confidence that had been absent before. Some of them whispered, surprised at the transformation. Teachers, too, started to see small differences. They still assumed she would struggle, but they could not ignore that something in her had changed. She was no longer the same quiet girl who faded into the background. She was someone preparing for a moment that could not be ignored. Even with growing confidence, self-doubt crept in. She worried about mistakes, about forgetting notes, about forgetting who she was when under the bright stage lights. At night, she would imagine the audience staring, expecting failure, and it made her heart pound. But then she would remember the hours she had spent practicing, the songs she had learned, the sketches she had drawn, and she realized that her preparation was stronger than her fear. Slowly, she began to trust herself. Friends began to offer support in unexpected ways. A classmate who had always been quiet too offered to watch her practice and give feedback. Another friend, who loved art, helped her design a small backdrop for the performance. The support, though small, felt powerful. She realized that even though teachers had misjudged her, there were people who believed in her and wanted to see her succeed. That realization strengthened her determination to perform well. As the day of the talent show approached, excitement mixed with nerves. Backstage, she felt her hands tremble and her stomach twist, but she reminded herself of every hour spent practicing, every small victory along the way. She took deep breaths, closed her eyes, and let herself feel the music inside her. The moment was almost here, and she had worked hard to be ready. She realized that no one could take away the effort, the courage, or the growth she had achieved, no matter what happened on stage. On the morning of the show, she sat quietly in her room, playing the piano one last time. Each note felt like a promise, to herself, to her parents, and to the small voice inside her that had never stopped believing. She remembered all the times she had been underestimated, all the times teachers and classmates had overlooked her, and she made a silent vow. She would not let fear control her. She would give her best performance not for anyone else, but for herself. At school, the hallways buzzed with energy. Students practiced, teachers arranged the stage, and the audience began to fill the seats. She watched it all quietly from backstage, taking note of the lights, the sounds, and the energy in the room. Every detail mattered. She adjusted her posture, rehearsed her breathing, and reminded herself that she was ready. Her moment on stage arrived sooner than expected. As she stepped into the spotlight, the bright lights made her pause for a fraction of a second. The audience murmured, and she felt the familiar twist of nerves in her stomach. But then she remembered the music inside her, the sketches that captured her vision, the countless hours she had spent preparing. She closed her eyes for a moment, let the world fade, and allowed herself to perform. When her fingers touched the keys, the music flowed naturally, carrying the emotions she had held inside for so long. The audience was quiet, listening intently. Each note told a story of struggle, persistence, and hope. Every melody reflected her journey, the hours of practice, and the quiet belief that she could shine. She moved with confidence, her body swaying gently with the rhythm, her expressions reflecting the depth of feeling behind the music. By the time she finished, the room was silent for a brief, suspended moment. Then, slowly, applause began to fill the space. At first, it was polite, but it grew louder, stronger, and more genuine. She opened her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the faces of teachers, classmates, and strangers fully focused on her. Their expressions had shifted. Surprise, admiration, and respect were there in place of doubt. She had done what she had set out to do. She had shown them and herself her true ability. Backstage, her friends and family rushed to congratulate her. She smiled, feeling a warmth she had never experienced before. For the first time, she felt fully recognized, not just for the performance, but for the years of persistence, courage, and growth that had led to this moment. The doubts of the past seemed to fade away, replaced by a new sense of possibility and self-belief. That day marked the beginning of a transformation. She realized that passion and perseverance could overcome misunderstanding and underestimation. She also understood that recognition from others, though powerful, was not as important as the belief in herself that had carried her to this stage. From that moment forward, she approached life differently, with confidence, determination, and a quiet assurance that her efforts mattered. The music room, the sketches, the private hours of practice, they had all prepared her for this moment. And now, she was ready to embrace the next steps, the next opportunities, and the next chance to show the world the talent that had been underestimated for so long. The days leading up to the school talent show were filled with a mixture of excitement and tension. She spent every free moment practicing her piece on the piano. Her fingers had grown confident and agile from hours of repetition, but the thought of performing in front of the entire school still made her heart race. She could feel her stomach twist every time she imagined stepping onto the stage. The music she loved so much now carried the weight of expectation, and that was both thrilling and terrifying. At school, the usual hum of activity seemed louder than ever. Posters announcing the talent show hung in the hallways, colorful and bold, displaying names of students who had already signed up. Some of them were her classmates, children who were always praised for their abilities, who seemed naturally talented and confident. She admired them, but she also felt a pang of fear. Could she really stand alongside them? Could she really shine when all eyes would be on her? She tried to push the fear aside, reminding herself of all the practice and preparation she had done. Her teachers had started to notice the change in her. She walked taller, spoke with more assurance in class, and seemed more focused. A few of them made small comments of encouragement, though most still underestimated her quietly. "Good luck in the talent show," one teacher said with a hint of doubt in their voice, as if they were curious to see whether she could actually deliver. The mixture of skepticism and mild encouragement gave her a strange energy. She felt challenged, and challenges had always pushed her to do better. She continued to prepare meticulously. She divided her practice into sections, focusing on the parts of her performance that were hardest, the moments where mistakes were most likely. She imagined herself on stage, playing perfectly, feeling the music flow through her, connecting with the audience. She worked on controlling her breathing, her posture, and even the expressions on her face, knowing that performance was more than just playing notes. It was telling a story with every movement and every sound. At home, she practiced late into the evenings. Her parents often listened quietly, offering gentle suggestions and encouragement. Sometimes they clapped at the end of a song, not because it was perfect, but because they recognized the effort and passion she put into it. Their support felt like a shield against the doubts and misjudgments she had faced for so long. In those moments, she realized that she was not performing just for the audience at school. She was performing for herself, for the growth and courage she had built over months of hard work. Despite all her preparation, doubts still crept in. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, she would imagine failing, hitting wrong notes, or forgetting the rhythm completely. She feared the whispers, the laughter, the judgment that had haunted her for years. But then she would remember the long hours of practice, the small victories, and the joy she felt when the music came alive in her hands. Slowly, she learned to transform fear into focus, using it to sharpen her mind and steady her nerves. Her friends played an important role in this preparation. A classmate who had always been supportive helped her rehearse in front of someone else, giving feedback and cheering her on. Another friend helped her visualize the stage, arranging a small practice setup to mimic the real environment. The presence of people who believed in her, even quietly, gave her confidence. She realized that support could come from unexpected places, and that even a little encouragement could make a huge difference. School days were tense. Every glance from teachers and students felt heavier than before, as if the anticipation of the performance had changed how everyone saw her. Some students whispered about who would win, others openly doubted her ability, and a few gave knowing smiles of encouragement. She tried to ignore the whispers, focusing on her music, but it was impossible to completely shut out the attention. She learned to channel it, letting the pressure push her rather than pull her down. As the day of the talent show drew closer, she started to notice small improvements that filled her with hope. She could play difficult passages with fewer mistakes, her fingers moving with a fluidity that had once seemed impossible. She learned to pause in moments of tension, to let silence speak as part of the performance. Every new skill she mastered became a building block, giving her more confidence for the big day. She could feel herself transforming, not just as a performer, but as a person. Evenings were spent imagining the audience. She pictured the crowded auditorium, the bright stage lights, and the curious eyes of her teachers and classmates. She imagined the reactions she hoped for: surprise, admiration, respect. But she also reminded herself that her performance was about more than recognition. It was about showing the world, and herself, what she was capable of. The thought of finally being seen for her true abilities gave her both excitement and determination. The night before the talent show, she could barely sleep. Her mind replayed every note, every movement, every detail of her preparation. She worried about forgetting, about stumbling, about failing in front of people who had long underestimated her. But she also felt a strange calm. She knew she had done everything she could to prepare. She realized that the fear she felt was part of the journey, a reminder that what she was about to do mattered deeply to her. The next morning, she woke early, her heart pounding with anticipation. She practiced one last time, making sure every note was perfect, every pause intentional, every expression clear. She put on her favorite outfit, something simple but comfortable, feeling that small details mattered in how she presented herself. Her parents watched silently, their pride shining in their eyes. "You are ready," they said. "No matter what happens, we are proud of you." Those words filled her with strength. At school, the energy was electric. Students rushed around, teachers gave instructions, and the auditorium began to fill with the hum of expectation. She stayed backstage, observing the other performers, taking note of their confidence and their nerves. She realized that everyone, no matter how confident they appeared, had moments of doubt. That knowledge made her feel less alone. She reminded herself that her preparation, her passion, and her courage had brought her here, and that was enough to face whatever came next. When it was her turn, the stage manager called her name. She stepped forward, the bright lights hitting her eyes, the audience stretching out before her. She felt her heart race, her hands tremble, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself of all the hours of practice. The first note rang out, clear and steady. Relief flooded through her. The music flowed naturally, her fingers moving with a confidence that had grown from months of preparation. Every note carried the emotions she had held inside for so long: the frustration, the hope, the quiet determination to succeed despite being underestimated. As she played, she noticed the audience leaning forward, listening intently. Teachers who had once doubted her now watched with curiosity, their expressions unreadable but focused. Classmates whispered to each other, surprised by the skill and emotion in her performance. She realized that she was no longer playing just for herself or her parents. She was speaking through music, telling a story that everyone in the room could feel, even if they could not put it into words. Her movements became part of the story. She swayed slightly with the rhythm, closed her eyes at moments of intensity, and allowed herself to feel the music fully. She remembered every mistake she had made in the past, every moment of doubt, and transformed them into strength. The performance was no longer about perfection. It was about authenticity, about letting her true self shine through despite years of misjudgment. By the time the final note rang out, the auditorium was silent for a brief moment. Then slowly applause began. It started small, polite, but quickly grew into something much louder, more genuine, more powerful. She opened her eyes and saw the reactions of her teachers, classmates, and family. There was surprise, admiration, and respect. They had seen her in a way they never had before. The girl who had been underestimated, who had been ignored and overlooked, had transformed in that single performance. Backstage, friends and family rushed to congratulate her. She felt a warmth and pride she had never known. For the first time, she was recognized not only for her talent but for the effort, courage, and persistence that had led her to this moment. The doubts of the past seemed to vanish, replaced by the exhilaration of accomplishment. She had faced fear, embraced her passion, and shown the world her true abilities. That performance became a turning point. She realized that talent and hard work could not be ignored forever. She understood that while some teachers might continue to underestimate her, she no longer needed their approval to feel worthy. The experience taught her the value of persistence, preparation, and self-belief. It was a moment that would shape her confidence and determination for years to come. Afterward, she returned to the music room, her sanctuary, and played again. The notes flowed freely, no longer carrying the weight of fear or doubt. She had proven to herself that she could rise above misjudgment and perform with authenticity and courage. Every key, every melody, every pause reflected not just her skill, but her journey, the struggles, the growth, and the quiet strength she had cultivated. From that day forward, she approached every challenge with the knowledge that preparation, passion, and perseverance could overcome doubt and misjudgment. The experience gave her confidence not just in music, but in every part of life. She had discovered that the most important recognition comes from within, from the belief in one's own abilities and the courage to pursue them, no matter what others might think. The talent show was more than a single performance. It was the beginning of a transformation. It marked the moment when she realized that she could change the way the world saw her, not by demanding attention, but by showing her true self through dedication, effort, and passion. She had faced fear, embraced her talent, and proven that the girl once underestimated could shine brighter than anyone had expected. The day of the talent show had arrived. The auditorium was filled with the low hum of chatter, the shifting of chairs, and the occasional laugh of nervous students. Backstage, she sat quietly, her fingers folded on her lap, her heart beating fast. She could hear the audience murmuring, teachers moving about, and the occasional tuning of instruments from other performers. Her palms were sweaty, and a nervous knot had formed in her stomach, but she focused on her breathing, reminding herself of all the preparation she had done. Every hour of practice, every late night with her piano, every small moment of self-doubt she had overcome. Those were what truly mattered. The lights backstage were bright and warm, and the faint smell of polish and paper mixed in the air. She took a moment to look around, at the other students preparing to perform, some chatting casually, others pacing nervously. She noticed the confidence in some of them and wondered if they too felt the same mixture of fear and excitement that she did. In a strange way, it was comforting to know that she was not alone in feeling anxious. Every performer had their moment of uncertainty. The stage manager called her name, and she stood slowly, feeling her knees tremble. She adjusted her posture and walked toward the stage, each step feeling heavier than the last. As she reached the stage entrance, the bright lights hit her eyes, and for a moment, she froze. The audience stretched out in front of her, filled with familiar faces. Teachers who had doubted her, classmates who had underestimated her, and friends and family who had supported her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind inside her. When she stepped onto the stage, the room seemed larger than it had before. The seats stretched far back, and the ceiling disappeared into shadows. She could hear whispers and shuffling from the audience, the sound of expectation pressing down on her. Her hands instinctively moved to the keys of the piano, and she closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. She reminded herself that she had prepared for this. She reminded herself that the music inside her was stronger than the fear outside. Her first note rang out clearly, breaking the silence of the auditorium. Relief flooded through her. The music, which had once been just a private joy, now carried her emotions into the room. Each note told a story of struggle, perseverance, and quiet determination. Her fingers moved with precision and feeling, each key producing a sound that reflected her journey. The audience leaned in slightly, as if drawn into the world she was creating with her music. As she continued, she felt a transformation within herself. The nervousness that had gripped her backstage melted into focus and confidence. She began to feel the rhythm in her bones, the flow of the melody carrying her forward. Every mistake she might have made in practice now seemed trivial, replaced by the energy of the moment. She allowed herself to become fully present in the performance, losing herself in the music and forgetting the eyes that were watching. The audience's reactions began to shift. Teachers who had once ignored her raised their eyebrows, a hint of surprise in their expressions. Classmates who had whispered doubts now sat quietly, captivated. Some had their mouths slightly open, astonished at the skill and emotion in her playing. Even the students who had never been kind to her looked stunned, unable to hide their admiration. She could sense that she was no longer just a quiet girl in the background. She was the center of attention, commanding it with every note. Her body moved subtly with the music, swaying gently, letting the rhythm guide her. She closed her eyes at times, feeling the energy of the room without being distracted by it. She let every note reflect her feelings, the frustration of being underestimated, the joy of discovery, the pride in her own effort. The performance was no longer about proving anyone wrong. It was about expressing herself fully, and that authenticity resonated with everyone in the room. By the middle of her piece, she felt a connection with the audience she had never experienced before. The energy in the room shifted from curiosity to genuine engagement. She noticed heads nodding, eyes widening, and subtle smiles forming. Teachers who had once doubted her were leaning forward, watching intently, as if trying to understand how she had transformed so completely. She felt a rush of satisfaction, not from recognition alone, but from the realization that her music had touched people in a way that words never could. The final section of her performance approached. She took a deep breath, feeling the culmination of every hour of practice, every quiet moment of doubt, every private struggle. She played the final notes with strength and precision, letting the music build to its peak before fading gently into silence. For a brief moment, the auditorium held its breath, suspended in awe. Then, the applause began, tentative at first, and then swelling into a powerful, thunderous sound. She opened her eyes, blinking against the bright stage lights, and saw the faces of the audience. There was surprise, admiration, and genuine respect. Teachers who had once dismissed her efforts now looked at her with a mix of amazement and pride. Classmates who had doubted her now clapped enthusiastically, some even standing. Friends who had supported her smiled broadly, their pride mirrored in their eyes. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy that she had never experienced before. Backstage, she was met with hugs and congratulations. Her parents' faces glowed with pride, and they whispered words of encouragement and love. Friends who had helped her prepare cheered, clapping her on the back. Even students who had been indifferent or skeptical offered smiles and congratulations. The girl who had been underestimated for so long had finally been seen, fully and completely, for the talent and effort she had poured into her passion. She realized, in that moment, that the journey had been as important as the performance itself. Every struggle, every hour of practice, every tear and doubt had led her here. She understood that recognition from others was powerful, but the most important recognition came from within, from the belief in her own abilities and the courage to pursue them despite the doubts of others. The experience had transformed her, not just as a performer, but as a person. The impact of her performance lasted long after the final applause. Teachers who had underestimated her began to treat her differently, offering support and guidance instead of doubt. Classmates who had dismissed her now approached her with curiosity and respect. She gained opportunities she had never imagined, more chances to perform, to showcase her talents, and to grow in ways that had once seemed impossible. Her confidence, built quietly over months of preparation, now radiated in every aspect of her life. That night, She returned home exhausted but elated. She sat at her piano, the instrument that had carried her through so much, and played quietly, letting the music flow freely without the pressure of performance. Each note reminded her of the journey she had taken, from being underestimated and overlooked to standing on stage, fully recognized and appreciated. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had proven, most importantly to herself, that she could rise above doubt and shine. She also realized something important about the power of belief. Her parents' support, her friends' encouragement, and her own determination had all played a role in her success. The experience taught her that talent alone was not enough. Passion, preparation, courage, and support were equally essential. She had learned that when people believed in themselves, and when others believed in them, extraordinary things could happen. In the days following the performance, the girl noticed a change in the way people interacted with her. Teachers asked for her input more often, acknowledging her ideas in class discussions. Classmates approached her with questions and compliments, and some even sought her help in ways that surprised her. She felt a newfound sense of belonging and confidence, knowing that she had broken through the barrier of misjudgment that had held her back for so long. Yet, despite the recognition, she remained humble and focused. She understood that one performance did not define her entirely, but it had shown her the possibilities of what she could achieve. She continued to practice, to explore her passions, and to grow, knowing that her journey was ongoing. Each day became an opportunity to build on the foundation she had laid, to continue proving to herself, not to others, what she was capable of. The performance also had a lasting effect on her self-image. She no longer questioned her abilities or doubted her worth. She had faced fear, taken a risk, and succeeded in a way that transcended mere applause. That experience became a source of inner strength, a reminder that she could overcome challenges and exceed expectations, no matter how high they seemed. Looking back, she realized that being underestimated had not been entirely negative. It had forced her to work harder, to develop resilience, and to cultivate a quiet determination that now set her apart. The very obstacles that had seemed unfair had shaped her character, making her stronger, more focused, and more capable. She understood that her past struggles were not failures, but stepping stones toward this defining moment. She began to see the world differently. She noticed the hidden talents in others, the quiet determination in students who were overlooked, the unrecognized potential in people who seemed ordinary. She had experienced firsthand how easily someone could be misjudged, and she became more empathetic, more understanding, and more patient with others. Her own journey had taught her the value of encouragement, the importance of noticing effort, and the power of believing in someone's potential. The girl's life continued to change after that performance. Doors opened that had once seemed closed, opportunities appeared that she had never imagined, and her confidence grew steadily. She continued to practice her music, explore her art, and pursue her passions with dedication and joy. The talent show had been a turning point, but it was only the beginning of a larger journey. A journey defined by courage, resilience, and the refusal to be limited by the doubts of others. That performance became a story she carried with her, a memory that reminded her of what she could achieve. It was proof that even when underestimated, even when ignored, a person's true abilities could not be hidden forever. With effort, persistence, and belief, she had turned doubt into triumph, silence into recognition, and misjudgment into respect. She had discovered that the world could be changed one performance, one act, and one moment at a time. After the talent show, her life began to change in ways she had never expected. The applause and recognition were still fresh in her mind, and every time she thought about it, a warm, proud feeling spread through her chest. It was more than just the moment on stage. It was the realization that all her effort, all the hours she had spent practicing in secret, had mattered. For the first time, she felt fully seen, not only by the audience but by herself. She had proved something that she had carried quietly for years, that she was capable, that her hard work was valid, and that her talent deserved attention. Teachers who had once doubted her now looked at her differently. Some came to her for input during class discussions, asking for her thoughts and opinions. They offered guidance and encouragement in ways they had never done before. Their skepticism had transformed into respect, and it made her feel both proud and a little amused. The same teachers who had underestimated her now had to acknowledge that they had misjudged her abilities. But she did not harbor resentment. She understood that people sometimes judge too quickly, and she chose to focus on her own growth rather than on their past doubts. Her classmates also began to see her in a new light. Those who had whispered, laughed, or ignored her now approached her with curiosity and admiration. Some asked her to help them with music or art projects, hoping to learn from her skills. She smiled at them, remembering the times she had felt invisible, and offered her guidance kindly. She understood how important encouragement and recognition could be, and she wanted to share that with others. She had learned firsthand the impact of support, and she wanted to pass it forward. Opportunities began to appear almost immediately. A local community center invited her to perform at a small event. Her parents encouraged her to accept, knowing that every experience would help her grow. She practiced diligently, just as she had before the talent show, but this time with more confidence. She no longer doubted herself as much, and she felt excited rather than nervous. The small stage at the community center became another step in her journey, another moment to share her abilities with others. Even as recognition grew, she remained humble. She knew that talent alone was not enough. She continued to practice daily, exploring new techniques on the piano and experimenting with different styles. She sketched in her notebook, capturing observations from her surroundings and translating them into art. Every note, every stroke of the pencil, was a reminder that improvement and growth were ongoing. She had tasted success, but she knew that persistence and effort would always be necessary to achieve more. Her family remained her strongest support. They celebrated every small victory, every new performance, and every new opportunity. Their pride and encouragement gave her strength, but she also began to rely more on her own judgment and confidence. She realized that while support from others was valuable, the belief she held in herself was the foundation of everything she could achieve. It was a belief that had carried her through years of being underestimated, and it would continue to guide her as she pursued her passions. With each new opportunity, her confidence grew. She performed at school events, community gatherings, and even small competitions. Each time, she felt the same mixture of nerves and excitement, but she had learned to use the nervous energy to enhance her performance rather than letting it paralyze her. She discovered that preparation, focus, and passion could transform fear into strength. The more she performed, the more she realized that her journey had never been about proving others wrong. It had always been about proving to herself that she could succeed despite doubt. She also began to notice changes in her peers. Students who had once struggled in their own ways began to approach her for encouragement. They had seen her overcome fear and doubt and wanted to understand how she did it. She shared her experiences openly, talking about practice, patience, and persistence. She reminded them that everyone has a unique path and that being underestimated does not define anyone's worth or potential. She found joy in helping others realize their abilities, and it gave her a sense of purpose beyond her own achievements. Over time, her perspective on school changed as well. She no longer felt invisible or dismissed. She participated in class more actively, confident in her ideas and insights. She raised her hand without hesitation, spoke up in discussions, and offered solutions to problems that once felt impossible. Teachers began to see her as a capable, intelligent student, and the classroom environment became a place where she could thrive. The skills she had developed through music and art, discipline, focus, creativity, helped her excel in other areas of learning as well. The girl began to set bigger goals for herself. She dreamed of performing on larger stages, of improving her skills further, and of sharing her talents with more people. She explored different styles of music, experimented with composition, and began to imagine creating something truly her own. Art became more than a hobby. It became a form of expression, a way to communicate ideas and emotions that she could not always put into words. She felt a growing sense of purpose and direction in her life. Her success also taught her the value of resilience. She understood that setbacks were inevitable and that not every performance or attempt would be perfect. She learned to view mistakes as opportunities to grow rather than as failures. Each challenge she faced, each difficult moment, became a lesson in patience and perseverance. She realized that resilience was not about avoiding difficulty, but about embracing it, learning from it, and continuing to move forward despite it. The experience also shaped her sense of identity. She no longer saw herself as the quiet, underestimated girl who faded into the background. She recognized her own worth and abilities, and she embraced the confidence that came with that recognition. She had learned that identity is not defined by the opinions of others, but by the effort, passion, and determination one brings to life. This understanding gave her a steady, enduring confidence that carried into every part of her life. Her relationships with others deepened as well. Friends who had supported her early on remained close, sharing in her successes and helping her navigate challenges. New friendships formed with people who admired her determination and talent, and she found a community of individuals who encouraged growth and creativity. She also became more empathetic, recognizing that many people face struggles and doubts that are not immediately visible. Her own journey had taught her to look beyond appearances and to offer kindness and support wherever possible. As months passed, she began to receive recognition beyond her school. Invitations to perform at local events became more frequent, and she gained small accolades for her skill and dedication. Each opportunity reinforced the lessons she had learned: that effort matters, that perseverance pays off, and that talent cannot be hidden forever. She remained focused on the journey rather than the accolades, understanding that success was measured not only by recognition but by personal growth and fulfillment. Through all of this, she continued to develop her passions. Music remained central to her life, but she also explored other creative outlets. She wrote songs, created art projects, and began to experiment with storytelling through her work. She discovered that creativity and expression were limitless, and the more she explored, the more confident she became in her ability to innovate and share her vision with the world. Each new project became a chance to challenge herself, to grow, and to inspire others. Her teachers, now fully aware of her potential, became mentors rather than doubters. They encouraged her to participate in competitions, guided her through challenges, and offered insights that helped her refine her skills. The once dismissive attitudes of the past were replaced by guidance, support, and collaboration. She recognized that while she had grown through her own effort, having mentors who believed in her helped her reach even higher levels of achievement. Her story became an inspiration to others. Students who had once been overlooked began to see that determination, effort, and self-belief could overcome misjudgment. Teachers shared her journey as an example of persistence and growth, reminding others that every student has unique strengths that may not be immediately visible. She became a symbol of resilience, showing that one performance, one moment of courage, could change the way the world saw a person. Despite all the recognition and opportunities, she remained grounded. She continued to value the quiet moments of practice, the private joy of creating music and art, and the satisfaction of knowing she had earned her achievements through effort and dedication. She understood that success was not a destination, but a continuous journey of learning, growing, and challenging oneself. The experiences of being underestimated had shaped her, but they no longer limited her. They had become the foundation of her confidence and her drive. Years later, she looked back on the talent show as a pivotal moment in her life. It had been the day when she first realized the power of belief, perseverance, and courage. It had been the moment when the world began to see her true abilities, and when she fully recognized her own potential. The lessons she had learned about resilience, self-belief, effort, and empathy continued to guide her every day. She understood that being underestimated had been a challenge, but it had also been a gift, shaping her into a strong, confident, and compassionate person. She continued to pursue her passions with dedication and joy. Each performance, each creative project, and each new opportunity became a step forward in a lifelong journey of growth and self-expression. She remained humble, grateful for the support of her family and friends, and mindful of the lessons she had learned from those who had once doubted her. She knew that her success was not just about talent, but about determination, courage, and the willingness to keep moving forward even when the world seemed to underestimate her. Looking back, she realized that her story was about more than one performance. It was about resilience, self-discovery, and the quiet power of believing in oneself. The experience had taught her that people may misjudge or doubt you, but true talent, effort, and persistence will eventually shine through. She had faced challenges, overcome doubt, and embraced her abilities fully, creating a life shaped by confidence, creativity, and the courage to pursue her dreams. And so, the girl who had once been underestimated by teachers and overlooked by classmates became a symbol of what is possible when determination meets opportunity. She continued to grow, to inspire, and to share her talents, always remembering the journey that had brought her to this point. The lesson she carried with her was simple but powerful. Never underestimate your own potential, and never let the doubts of others define who you are. Her life, once shadowed by misjudgment, was now illuminated by achievement, confidence, and the knowledge that perseverance and self-belief could change everything. The journey that began in quiet struggle had transformed into a life filled with opportunity, creativity, and recognition. A life that proved, in the end, that one moment of courage can indeed change everything.